All right, this talk is easy breeding and expansion methods. And for some of you, for the more advanced beekeepers of you, this is going to be, a lot of these are going to be just old hat. I mean, it's, I start off with the most basic walkaway splits, just the basic what you need to understand for splitting, and then get into some more advanced methods. So if you know how to split, you probably don't need to hear this, but that's okay. There are a few people in the group who, for this information, will be very useful. So I'm Solomon Parker. My claim to fame, I guess, is I started the Treatment-Free Beekeeping Facebook group, which is now up to nearly 27,000 members. So we do have representation in the world. There are a lot of treatment-free beekeepers out there, and I recommend you go to the Be Informed Partnership and look at the numbers. I hope you're not too discouraged, because there are still more treating beekeepers than there are non-treating beekeepers, but we've become a sizable minority, and in a lot of places we are the majority. A lot of times down in the south, especially southern parts of the country where it's warmer, it tends to be easier to be a treatment-free beekeeper, and so people have discovered that they don't have to treat, and so they don't. So yeah, I just recommend getting out there, checking the numbers, see. Oh, and also I'll show you some links at the end, but I have all the links for different groups and different information sources, and you grab one of my business cards there. It has them all listed as well. I also have the Treatment-Free Beekeeping podcast, which is a podcast where I interview famous beekeepers or not famous beekeepers of all types. So we'll just get started here. So I have come to the belief that the most important thing in treatment-free beekeeping is, you can put it a few different ways. You could say outbreeding the mites. You can say, but the idea is that you're not trying to catch up from your losses. It's you're trying to get ahead of your losses. Because there's going to be losses. That's the one thing that I think that a lot of people in the modern beekeeping world, that is a mindset driven by commercial beekeeping, where the whole point is to not lose hives, so that you can take them to almonds, so that you can make money, so that you can eat, basically. But if you're in this room, most of you are not commercial beekeepers. Most of you are backyard beekeepers or hobbyists, maybe even some sideliners. So you don't need to do things that way. And especially with treatment-free beekeeping, we are looking for opportunities to change the mindset. Because again, we're not commercial beekeepers. So much of our beekeeping world is based on commercial beekeeping. Our hives, these hives are designed for migratory commercial beekeepers. They're thin. They've got thin walls. This is not how a hollow in a tree looks. Right? This is designed for a purpose. We need to realize that this is designed for a purpose, for a specific group of people. If we don't belong to that group of people, we don't necessarily have to identify with that purpose, right? Like in this case, I'm fine with Langstroth hives. That's what I use, but you don't have to. This isn't a beehive. This is just one of the things in which we keep bees. So one of the other things that seems to have taken predominance due to the effect of commercial beekeeping is buying bees from different places, right? So you can see the first thing on here is locally acclimated bees. So much of the bee losses that I see every year from new beekeepers especially come from issues related to the bees not being acclimated to where they're living. Most bees mass produced in this country are produced in the South or in California. It's kind of an arc across the bottom of the country. California, Texas, Alabama is a big state, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia. This is where a lot of the bees come from, because you can get the whole process going earlier in the year. You can stimulatively feed the bees, get them producing a lot of bees. Get your drones out there, get your queens out there, and so that you can sell queens in packages and nukes to people further up north where most of the population is. But the problem with that, you may be starting to see, is that in the south it's warm. The winters are fairly warm. You know, I used to say, if you're buying bees from the south, you're basically getting bees that have had to deal with no worse weather than you get on Halloween. All right? Halloween, usually it gets a bit chilly the further north you get up. But your winter is much longer and much harsher than Halloween. But the bees that you're buying have only had to do Halloween work. They're not prepared, they're not acclimated to your area. So bringing in bees, you're kicking yourself in the shin right at the beginning. The other thing, and this is what kind of we talked about last night, is when you're bringing in bees that will eventually hybridize with your local stock, a lot of times that hybridization will cause them to become mean. That second generation will be really mean because you're taking more distantly related bees, crossing them with your local bees, and you get that hybrid vigor, and a lot of times that comes out as meanness. So we in America, we tend to have this consumer mindset where we want to buy a queen from here, we want to buy a queen from here, we want a Russian, we want a Carniolan, we want an Italian, we want a whatever. We think that by putting all those things together, by increasing genetic diversity, that we're benefiting ourselves. We are not benefiting ourselves. We are shooting ourselves in the foot, kicking ourselves in the shin, circular firing squad, whatever you want to talk about it. The other thing is the cost. First of all, if you're buying a queen from somewhere else, say your hive goes queenless and you're buying a queen, you're beholden to whoever's supplying you the queen, both in quality and in timing. And a lot of times the queen's going to show up dead. Now you have to wait another week or two to get another queen. And again, you're shooting yourself in the foot. If you had your own queen or the ability to make your own queen on site, you don't have to worry about that. Furthermore, in the case of cost, when you're buying something, you introduce money into the situation. When you can make your own bees or catch your own bees, like the talk that I did last year here, which you can find on YouTube about swarm trapping, when you can make your own bees or get them for free by catching swarms, if they die, you already know how to get more. That takes a great weight of worry and concern off your mind and makes your beekeeping experience better, makes it more fun. Because you know that if your hive dies, you can just get another one. You can go catch another one next year, and it's a lot of fun. Learning experience is an important one for me. I'm a person who I am always learning. There's not a day when I'm not reading a Wikipedia article or listening to a podcast or watching a video about something that I want to know about. You know, we don't keep bees just to have bees. We keep bees to do beekeeping, right? It's not a noun, it's a verb. It's not a set thing, it's a thing we do. So keeping that in mind, keep moving forward, learning more methods and new things every year. That's going to be good for you. You can also do things like we were once again talking about last night. You can focus on traits. If you've got mean bees, you can split and breed from your nicer or nice bees and replace the mean bees. I don't know about you, but it's not fun to go work in a hive and get stung up all the time. I want to go work in the hive and be able to work barehanded, to open a hive, pull a frame out, know that while I'm handling it and moving it around, that I can feel the bees. I'm not squishing anybody. I'm not making anybody mad. And not only that, by being barehanded, it gives me a greater appreciation for the carefulness that you can exercise and keep the hive from getting upset. And I find that I rarely even use smoke. I keep a lit smoker next to me just in case somebody gets upset, but I rarely use smoke because I've learned over the years how to handle everything delicately and gently, but efficiently, so that the bees don't get upset. I feel you can get, by making your own queens, you can get better quality queens than the ones that are commercially available. It used to be that they focused more on quality, that there would be plenty of time. They would allow a queen to lay and make sure she's laying well. And nowadays, a lot of times, you can even see this in videos on YouTube, they don't really care if she's laying well. If there's eggs in the mating nuke, she's out the door. You don't know if she's properly mated. You don't know what those bees will be like. But with your own bees, if you're making your own queens, you can have time to see the daughters of the queen that you've made and decide, you know, with just a 5-frame nuke. At that point, if there's something wrong, you can just pinch the queen and recombine, and you're back to where you started. So it gives you an opportunity to test out a queen before putting her into production. Whereas with a commercial queen, you really only the thing you have is the trust of your producer. Whether in that I can't speak to how that'll work out for you. It depends on where you're getting your bees. If you're not having fun, don't do it. That's my motto for my podcast. If you're not having fun, we all have plenty of things to worry about in our life. There's no reason to add one more. You know, if this is a hobby, especially, you're doing it to have fun. So get rid of worry, get rid of concern about things dying. By making your own bees, you can have a lot more fun. There's so many people, I'm worried they're gonna die. Well, don't. That's not really up to you. Worrying, every religious tradition in the history of the world has told you not to worry. It's in the Bible. It's even non-religious spiritual teachers. Like, the number one thing is don't worry. There's ultimately, in the grand scheme of the universe, there's very little that you can control. So just enjoy it. And there's a possibility, if you get good at this, you can make some money doing it too. I really enjoy making queens and making nukes and selling them. Not in a huge numbers, but, you know, enough to buy a few new boxes every year, enough to buy a box of frames, or enough, you know, just enough to make it part of the process. Making money is enjoyable, but it's not about making money, but making money is enjoyable. This is just kind of a disclaimer. This is connected to my swarm trapping talk, which again you can find on YouTube. And I just want to tell everybody that it's important to also have swarms as part of your expansion methods, because you want to become interactive with your local feral population, such as it is. Out here, there's feral bees everywhere. I give you go wandering around the property here. I'm told there are 4 feral colonies on the property. I found 2 of them. Just go look at them. The feral bees are the ones that are already doing, in a natural environment, what we're trying to do in a hive as treatment-free beekeepers. And sometimes you might find my friend Jason Bruns in Indiana. He's gotten to the point where he doesn't do splits anymore. He doesn't do a lot of the intensive management beekeeping stuff that we've come to expect, because he just catches swarms, and that's what he enjoys doing. He gives away most of them, keeps the best ones for himself. And so he's got all these feral bees that are doing fantastic things, and he doesn't have to worry about losing hives or splitting or even breeding, because he gets so many swarms, he just keeps the ones he likes. All right, so let's talk about some basic methods. Now, each one of these has a title. Don't pay attention to that. Doesn't mean anything. You're not going to hear it anywhere else. It's just, I'm a sucker for a good title, and hopefully it will help you remember what I'm saying. But, like, you're not going to be able to look these up in somebody else's book. This is just my names that I stick on stuff. All right, so this is what will normally be called the Walkaway split. And basically, all you're going to do is you're going to take your hive, you're going to take half the frames, you know what I mean, half the frames, and you're going to put them in a separate hive. You don't have to find the queen. All you really need to do is make sure that there is open brood in both hives. Doesn't have to be a lot. Open brood, if you can find or see eggs, that's even better. But open brood will generally get you some eggs or some very young brood that can be made into a new queen. That's all there is to it. Yeah?
Well, you got to make sure that Walkaway has some honey if they're flying and you're dealing with foragers.
That helps. There's a whole bunch of things that I'll talk a little bit about here that can help. But just basically a split, you can split everything in half, and if you generally get things half and half, if they're sharing honey, sharing brood, it'll happen.
When you're saying half and half, you're meaning rearranging the frames in both, if there's 2 boxes, to make sure the brood and honey is equal in both?
Yes, more or less. Yeah, and by the way, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I want to make sure that you leave this without missing something that you feel like you needed that maybe I didn't mention. Yeah.
How do they know when they come home which hive to go to?
The foragers will always come back to the original location. And so that's what I'll get into here in a little bit. Yes?
Solomon, what time of year would you do splits by where you're at, Oregon?
Where I'm at, I would want to do splits if the weather's good enough in April or May. If you have, and again, this is important to understand that all beekeeping is local. So you want to do splits around the time when you have swarms in your area, definitely after you're seeing drones. Yeah, after you're seeing drones in your hive, or several weeks after you're seeing drones. I can't tell you exactly what it'll be in your area because I don't live in your area, but those are some of the things to look for. You want lots of things blooming. You want reasonably warm weather, nice springtime, right? So some of the things that we can do to enhance this. Now if you take a hive, say a 2-box hive, and you split it and you put them right next to each other, right? All your foragers are going to come back to that spot. Most of them are going to end up in the hive with the queen in it. And that's, if you're trying to find the queen, then that can help you figure that out. But that hive is going to be very well populated. The hive without the queen is not going to be very well populated and may have trouble keeping brood warm, building a new queen. So what you can do to mitigate that is, the easiest thing you can do is every day or two switch places with the hive. That way, so if the workers are accustomed to coming back to this hive, now this hive that was here is getting the extra foragers coming back, and then you can switch it back and forth, and that's going to be a little more difficult because you're going to have to lift this thing and do that. So one of the most common methods you'll hear people talk about is when you do a split like that, you take the other hive a couple of miles away. A couple miles away, whatever foragers are in that hive will not know how to get back to the original spot. And so they'll reorient themselves and they'll identify the new spot as home. All right, is everybody still on track with me? Mike? Sure.
It's talking about stopping like 2 hives once you've done the split. 12 days from now, don't do that again.
Right.
Now we've got her and queen.
Exactly.
Exactly.
What he's talking about there is when the new queen goes out to mate, she's going to come back. And if you've switched the hive while she's gone, she's going to come back into the wrong hive, and she's probably going to depose your original queen.
Even if you switch the hive the day before she flew out, she's been orienting for a couple of days.
Yeah. So one of the ways that it would be really good to take the opportunity to learn the life cycle of a queen from egg to mating, and map out which of those days is not a good day to move the hive. And you can find a spreadsheet on my website at parkerbees.com that will tell you exactly that whole list, or you can find anywhere on the internet, you can find plenty of examples of when that'll happen. And so when you do the split, the day that you do the split, you can basically assume is day 4. So the egg is laid on day 1. You basically assume that that's day 4 or 5. And from there you can plan out when the queen will be doing her mating flights. All right? Good point. And those of you that are advanced beekeepers, if there's something you want to add, like, feel free, because I'm always trying to expand these things. So one of the downsides to this method is it's inefficient. Go ahead.
Since you asked us to interrupt.
Yeah. Raise your hand
I think
first.
I learned from Dee last year was when we do those splits, is where your original hive was, you took the split from, put your splits in that position and put the original hive just next to it.
Yes.
And a lot of foragers will go into the nucleus or the new hive because that's one's always going to be shorter foragers.
Yes. Your queen, the hive with the original queen, if you found the queen, is going to have more of the bees are going to want to gravitate to her because of her pheromones and things. So you can also make the new split, you can give it more of the brood, give the old hive, give the mother hive more empty comb or foundation, because the queen will be able to lay that back up quickly and recover quickly from the loss of all that brood, whereas the new one is going to need more brood for about a month or so to compensate for no new eggs being laid in the hive. Yeah.
And if you did find the queen and you're choosing which one to move 2 miles away, it should be the one with the queen.
Yeah, that would be, yeah. Yeah, so move the queen. The hive with the queen is the one that you don't have to be as concerned about.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but
If you're moving too far, 2 miles away, you're going to retain foragers on each side.
right. But you're only going to retain the foragers that you moved with the hive. Most of the foragers that are out in the field are going to come back to the old hive. Yeah.
What time of day do you use splits?
I like to do any time that your bees are happy or not terribly unhappy with you being in the hive is a good time. If you work them early in the morning, they're going to be upset. If you work them late in the evening, they're going to be upset. If you work them while it's raining, it's going to be upset. So it's kind of a self-correcting problem. Yeah.
If you do your rearrangement of the brood frames the day before, then if you come back in the morning and split, you're not messing with the bees. It really doesn't upset them too much, and then you do it before they're flying, then you get a pretty equal number of foragers.
Yeah, if you can keep the foragers, move the foragers with the hive, you can keep more of them.
But that's more work.
It is more work.
Move the foragers with the new split, right?
Right, if possible. So one of the reasons why we don't want to do this one, now, I'm going to say, first of all, this is for a beginning beekeeper. This is like the basic thing. This is the thing you do when we talk about splits. This is what we're talking about, right? But the reason you might want to graduate from this method is because in all that time, they're going to spend almost 2 weeks making a new queen, and then it's going to be another week or two before she starts laying. You've expended 3 to 4 weeks of time making this new queen for your split. But what you've actually made is maybe a dozen queens. They're going to make a bunch of queens. And most of them are going to end up dead on the front doorstep of the hive. And this is an example of this. I made a bunch of Walkaway splits one year. And just out of curiosity, I went out and inspected the front of the hives after the time when they should have hatched. And I found all of these dead virgin queens because, as we know from basic bee biology, the first queen that hatches out will likely kill the other ones. All right, so when she kills the other ones, then in a sense, you've kind of wasted that opportunity of making queens. So what you can do instead, and get a little bit more, this is out of order. What you can do instead is you can take those queen cells that they've made and you can split them up further into smaller nukes. Yeah.
So Solomon, maybe I missed the part, but those queens right there in the picture, those were the ones that were in their cell and killed in their cell?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So what you can,
Shortly after the first one, and then they had a fight. Either one could have happened.
right. The queen either killed them in their cell or started the process and then the workers finished it, or if 2 of them hatched at the same time, they had a fight and one of them stung the other one to death. So that's part of the process of natural selection. So It is a little bit wasteful, but ultimately it produces the best quality product for the species. But because we don't want to waste stuff always, we can take those queen cells, again, take a look at that queen raising calendar on the website. You can find it wherever, it doesn't matter. You don't have to get it from me. Take a look at that and find out what are good days to move the cells. After the cells are capped is a good time, and right before the cells hatch is a good time. In the middle, you don't want to mess with them because they're a little bit more fragile. You want to get them before they've fully turned into a pupa, or after, when they're almost done, almost finished, when their bodies are hardened and the pupating process is nearly complete. So what you can do is, if you have good weather conditions, depending on your climate, a lot of you are from warm climates, you can make small nukes. Or you can take brood from another hive and make nukes and add a frame, or you can cut the queen cell out from the frame, or top bar, whatever you're using, and you can stick that between, you can kind of stick it to a comb, and then you can kind of squeeze it between another one. You don't want to smash it, but you can squeeze it between there so it holds it in. You can put that in a new hive, and you can make as many new hives as you have queen cells. And so you're not wasting, you're not going to end up with dead queens out in front of your hives. And so you can go from making one split to making 5, 8, 10 nukes. And you can do that by, if your original hive is strong enough, which is usually not strong enough to make more than 3 or 4 good nukes, depending on your conditions. But if you borrow brood from your other hives, you can make as many as you have queen cells. And if you have more queen cells, if you got 2 queen cells that are really close, you can't get them separated without damaging them, you can just put that in one nuke and they'll figure it out. One of them's going to win. Any questions before we go on? One of the new methods that I learned this year is called, I'm calling it the shaken nuke because I haven't come up with a fun name for it yet. And the basic idea behind this is you're going to remove all the brood from, you're going to take your hive off your stand. You can put a new empty box back there. You're going to shake all the bees off of the brood in front of the hive. You want to make sure that they'll be able to get back in. Like if you do a tall hive stand, they might have some trouble. But if you got a good ramp or something, you can shake them all. And so you don't have to find the queen, because you shake her off, she'll crawl in with everybody else. You then take the brood that you want to become your new nucleus hive, and you put that in a box, and you put that on top of a queen excluder, on top of the hive that you've just shaken all the bees in front of. Now all the nurse bees are going to come up, not all of them, but as many as needed are going to come up within the next hour or 2 and cover that brood to keep it warm, because that's what they do. And so you can take most of the brood and get most of the workers, most of the nurse bees, and get them up on the comb. And then you can take that, put it somewhere else, either let them raise their own queen or put another queen cell or introduce a new queen into that nuke. Because all those bees in there are nurse bees, they won't drift back to the old hive. So whatever you have in there, once you figured out that you have enough, that's all you need. That's all it's going to go. You can do, if you want to make a 5-frame nuke, you can build yourself a little adapter to sit on top of your hive with 5-frame nuke size with a queen excluder, so that you don't have, or you can just put a queen excluder, put a couple of boards down, put your nuke on there if you're cheap. I'm cheap. Yeah.
I had really good luck doing that, putting a 5-frame nuke on top of the hive with 2 3-inch boards on either side as auxiliary tops. And
Yeah.
you can use that as a super, you can use it to repopulate whatever.
Yeah, and especially if you're introducing an already mated queen, those nurse bees are going to be the best bees in the hive that are going to get along with that new queen. The more foragers you have in a hive, the more they are attuned to the old queen and may not like the new queen, and your chances of introducing a new queen successfully are lower. Yeah.
On that subject, if you're gonna do this, you do not want to introduce a queen right away. they say at least 24 hours, but I think it's more like 3 days. And we have actually the best success. This isn't treatment-free beekeeping, but making nucs in a similar fashion to this, and then introducing the queens on the 10th day after you made it. And at that point, the cells that they have raised, you can mash and introduce the queen, and we get really high acceptance.
Yeah. In fact, I recently did a podcast episode with a virgin queen producer in Missouri. I think his name's Corey. Check out that episode. He talks about this a lot. One of the best, if you want almost perfect introduction of a new queen every time, you let the nuke make queen cells and then smash the queen cells and then put in a queen, because at that point they're desperate. They have no other option. They've got to accept whatever queen they're given, and it's almost 100% at that point.
I think you wasted 10 days or whatever.
That's true.
I don't know. I give it 2 hours. 2 hours.
2 hours works.
I have no problem with using the queen after 2 hours.
When I do queen cells, it's usually just a couple hours.
Like I dequeen them in the afternoon, the next morning, and that's kind of ideal. I wait 24 hours, now I got cells, now I got to go looking through to find cells. I don't want to work that hard. But 2 hours, they know their queens.
You said you introduce your queens after 10 days. Those queens still in a cage that have to be eaten out, or they're now free running?
They have to be eaten out.
Eaten out.
Yeah, with the candy.
So,
But you can do it with cells or virgins.
so it's going to be another 3 days after before the queen actually starts running around.
Not necessarily. You can take a little nail or a paper clip
Yeah.
and put a little hole in the candy bar, and they can eat through it in a couple hours.
Yeah.
Or you can just smoke them a little bit and throw a virgin in there. It'll usually work.
The ones that I did this last year, I did what Michael did, is after about 2 hours of them being queenless, I put in queens in there, and they seemed to all take. I was talking to a Greek beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper, and what he does is he will spray both the queen and the hive with sugar water and introduce new queens straight away.
Yeah.
And he said that way it basically dilutes the previous queen's pheromones and makes they then should find out the new queen after that all this way.
I think it also depends on the type of bees you're using. Some bees are just, I don't know if the pheromones of the queens are that much different or longer lasting, but it seems to have an effect. And definitely feeding or using something else to mask the pheromones helps.
In my experience, the hotter the hive, the more difficult it will be to requeen at any rate, to the point where I've had to completely take a hive apart and make like a dozen 3-frame nukes and put a new queen in each of them before they would they don't like it. But the overall point here in what everybody's talking about, this is all good stuff. There are lots of different methods. Do some experimentation, try some different things, and do what works for you. I'm not telling you how you have to do it. We're all telling you how you can do it, ways that do work for us. I've tried a couple of things that they've done. I've tried other things that I'm not talking about here. There's plenty for everybody. I'm not worried about anything. There's no proprietary methods. Just do what works. Do some experimentation, do some learning. Be really good for you. Now this is if you happen to find a hive that's superseding, this will usually happen in the middle of summer. Superseding is when a hive naturally replaces its own queen. And so what you'll see is the hive will be acting queenless if you get a little bit more experience to find out what acting queenless looks like. But you'll find cells that are made from worker cells that have been kind of carved out and reshaped into queen cells. They'll be generally somewhere in the middle of a brood area. And you can do the same thing by splitting up a hive and giving queen cells to each nucleus. Basically what we're talking about before, just under different conditions. This one's a little bit more fun during swarming season because you have to pay attention, because if you don't, you're going to lose your swarm and then you lost your swarm. It's not a bad thing. Swarming is natural. Swarming is as natural as, reproduction. Most of us have done it. We know how it works. So hives want to swarm, and so you can use that swarming instinct to your advantage and do the same thing that we talked about before. If the queen has not left the hive yet, you can prevent the swarm and keep all those bees and divide them up among the nukes, however you want to do it. If the swarm has already left, then those nukes are going to be a little bit weaker because the queen has taken a bunch of the workers that were in the hive. All right? So you can, in this case, you can sort of, by not increasing the size of the hive, you can sort of cause swarming to happen. You pay attention to the weather. I had a really interesting happening this last year. We'd had a long stretch of rain right when a swarming season would be. And so the first sunny, warm day that happened, I knew like that was swarming day. So by paying attention to the weather, you can know when swarming days happen. You can catch your own swarms if they're coming out of your hives and you see it. You can follow them and rehive that swarm. Or you know that if you have swarm traps out, you're probably going to be getting calls from your swarm trap hosts that you have bees in those traps that day. So it's not just all blind. It's when you know what you're doing, things happen. You know what you're doing. You can kind of predict the future.
One thing that's less work rather than checking it every week for swarm cells, add your supers. Then when you decide you want them to go to swarm cells, take all the supers off, take at least one box off, shake all those bees back in so they're all really crowded down, put that on some other hive, and now they're going to swarm.
Yeah, you can force a swarm that way. Yeah. So now we're getting more into, I'm kind of gradually introducing you into the way that commercial queens are made. So this is what I talked about earlier about when that hive is queenless, you take the cells and divide them apart. Now if you take that and introduce the commercial methods into it, basically, now this is, those of you commercial beekeepers, you're probably going to say that I'm totally glossing over a bunch of details. Admitted, I'm not worried about it. But this is basically how it happens. They're going to graft day-old larvae into queen cups. They're going to put those into a queenless cell builder nuke. They're going to shake in some nurse bees. You're going to have plenty of young nurse bees in there to feed those queens. They'll either move it to a queen right finisher above a queen excluder. You don't want the queens to get to the cells or they'll tear them down. Or sometimes they'll, depending on how different people have, again, find a method you like and use it. Try them all, have fun, use it. If not, you're missing out on a lot of great stuff. And then after the queen cells are finished, they're going to be moving the queen cells to mating nukes. You've probably seen those little styrofoam mating nukes that you can buy from any beekeeping supplier for just a few bucks. The reason why they use those is because they're small. They can be populated with just a cup or two of bees. You can get a queen mated quickly. But the problem is, once she starts laying, you've got a very short amount of time before they're going to want to swarm out of that hive because it's too small to support any reasonable population of bees. So, yeah.
A lot of new beekeepers talk about buying a couple packages and then splitting those packages the same season. We've got a really short season, and I think it's usually a mistake. What do you look for in a hive as far as hive strength to decide that that hive's strong enough, has enough resources to do a good job for you?
If you've got several hives, it's usually pretty easy to differentiate between them to see which one is doing the right thing. You want a hive that is building up at the right time in the season. If they're building up in January and you go to the hive and on a sunny day they're all flying out and they're doing stuff that seems kind of out of season, you might want to be concerned that they're going too fast. And if you're already into your high blooming season and they're still kind of piddling along, they haven't built up their brood nest yet, they're too late. So you're looking for a hive that builds up at the right time, not too early, not too late, builds up quickly, like the process doesn't take a long time, like they're going to take a certain amount of time before your honey flows work. And this is really important also in your local area, to keep yourself a little spreadsheet or a little list where you say, I spotted dandelions today. February 15th, dandelions. February 18th, daffodils. You're going to keep track of those things so that you can get in your mind those markers about what time things happen. And you'll start to see the bees that are building up. They'll be bringing in you might see a little dandelion pollen, but more like daffodils. You'll see a lot of daffodil pollen because it's bright yellow. Yeah.
The other reason to keep that diary is you're going to find from year to year it changes, and then a lot of beekeeping is trying to predict things. Bees are trying to predict things too, which is I want the population to peak right when the main flow hits. Well, how do I know when the main? And there's things like there's manipulations I like to do like 2 weeks before the main flow sometimes. Well, I want to know when the main flow is going to be. And if everything this year is running 3 weeks ahead of a typical year, then I'll know it because I've been tracking it from year to year. And I now know usually the apples bloom on this day, but this year they're blooming 3 weeks early. Then I got to pay attention to what's going on. So I'm going to be swarming 3 weeks early, and if I'm out there and get supers on them, I'm going to be in trouble. Or they may be running 3 weeks late. I've seen things run as much as 3 weeks early and 3 weeks late. Now, typically they're somewhere around average, but not always. One year will be really early, and one year will be just a little early, and one year will be right on about normal, and one year will be running a little late. But if you're tracking this from year to year in your diary, then you can go back and look and say, well, the average day when this one's is this, but it's early or it's late, and you can then make better decisions as a beekeeper.
That's exactly right. And when you have good local acclimated bees, they will generally keep track of that for you. The best, you probably heard of people who do stimulative feeding. They'll feed sugar syrup and pollen patties in late winter, very early spring. What they're trying to do is artificially control this thing, get the population up at the right time. But the best stimulative feeding you can possibly do for your hive is to have a hive that doesn't need stimulative feeding, hive that builds up on time on its own. And that's one of the great important things about local bees. But yeah, he's absolutely right. Keep track of that, because, like, for instance, in a good year in Arkansas, I would do my grafting on spring break, third week of March. Other years I had, in fact, there's a picture on my website of my yard covered in snow, and I was really kind of perturbed because the yard's covered in snow and I have queen cells in the hives being built, and that happening at that time is not a good program. They're not able to keep the queens as warm as they'd like, and they didn't turn out very good. Almost the whole crop totally failed. And it was a freak storm. It wasn't a normal thing. Now, one of the things about drones, you will need drones to mate with your new queen. That's why I talked earlier about doing splits after your drones appear. But you don't have to control your area. There's a lot of misconceptions about line breeding and isolated breeding, and I've had plenty of people tell me that treatment-free, I'm sure treatment-free is possible, but only in isolated areas. That's not true. In 25 years of traditional line breeding, isolated breeding, instrumental insemination, controlling the drones in the area, there's no commercial producers that have really created treatment-free bees using that method. The only way you make treatment-free bees is by not treating bees. That's the only way. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've heard everybody's theories. I've watched over the years as people have tried it and failed. The only way to have not treated bees is to not treat bees.
It's the definition of what's treatment.
Well,
that opens another can of worms, but I don't want an answer on that.
If they're not surviving on their own, you're doing something that's causing them to survive, and that's the treatment. That's my definition.
I mean, I put 4.9 foundation. Is that treatment?
No, it's foundation.
I got you.
It's like when people talk about, I planted thyme around my hives. The bees will get the thyme all, and that'll stop the mites. No, that's called gardening. It's totally unrelated to what you can do that. That's great. Plant all the time you want. That's gardening. You can talk about that in another Facebook group. So what we're trying to do as treatment-free beekeepers, by producing untreated drones, our drones are going to be more virile. Maybe they'll fly faster. Maybe they'll be more energetic. Maybe their sperm will last longer in a queen. We are trying to outcompete those package bees that are in our neighborhood. And so it's good for us to produce drones. We can dilute effects that we might have in our area. And really, because the queen mates with so many drones, like the typical number is up to 20, but now I've heard some people saying that it might be quite a bit more than that. By getting a better distribution of those drones in our queen, you can have a certain group of daughters in that hive that will have traits that can help the whole hive survive. The whole hive doesn't have to be totally hygienic. Like Mike was talking about last night, it's better to have 20% of the hive that's 100% hygienic than it is to have 100% of the hive that's 20% hygienic. That's one of the benefits of that natural genetic diversity that queen goes out and collects for us. So drones are good. So here's my method. I'll just go through this really quick with you if you want to get into grafting and playing around with that. A lot of people are scared of grafting, maybe because of bad eyesight, or they're just concerned that they'll hurt the bees or something. Really, I look at it like this. You're taking a tiny spoon, you're picking up a tiny Cheerio out of a tiny bowl, and you're putting it into a slightly larger bowl. That's really all there is to it. There are a lot of graftless methods, like the Nicot method or Man Lake's graftless method, which is basically the Nicot method. So you can get those kits. I mean, it's going to cost you a few bucks to get the kit to set up to do that, but you can without grafting. Grafting's not that hard. There's a wide variation at this point of different tools. Plastic, stainless steel. I like the bamboo grafting tool. It's fairly easy to work with. It's cheap. It only costs a few dollars. I actually had a wax moth grub ate the end off of my bamboo grafting tool, so I had to buy another one. So what I do is I prepare a Queen-Right cell builder. It's going to look like this. And this is called, the official name is the Ben Hardin method. You can find it online. I have a full write-up on my website about it. There's a full write-up on, there's a British beekeeper who died a few years back, but his website's still up. Bushman. Yeah, so you can find the whole write-up there. If you're looking for it, you can find it. It's called Hardin, Ben Hardin, H-A-R-D-E-N. It was originally created to produce royal jelly, because you can continuously produce queen cells, and you just go in and harvest the royal jelly, make some new queen cells, keep the process going. You can do the same thing with queens. You can, by introducing new queen cell grafts every week or two, you can continuously produce queens at a low volume, which for a beekeeper like us, backyard beekeeper who doesn't have 1,000 hives to use, you can use this method. You can maintain your productivity in this hive because you can still use supers, you can still carry on like normal. And you only need one hive to make the full queen process. So you can see how I set it up here. I actually, the first time I made my dummy frames, they're just little boxes made out of plywood. I made them too wide, or too narrow, I mean. So instead of 4 frames, I have 5. And so that just means I've got one cell bar frame in the middle. I've got like two pollen and brood frames on either side. So I like to go in, when I first set it up, I'm going to pull frames of brood out of the brood nest, put them up above a queen excluder with my frame dummies, and I'll put an empty frame of just empty comb in the bottom in the brood nest, because usually when you do that, the queen will lay that up with eggs immediately. And so when you come back 4 days later to do your grafting, you've got a full frame of the perfect aged larva. So I'm going to graft the larvae into the queen cups on the 4th day. Again, use your queen calendar. I'll put them in the hive. I'll also put the empty queen cups in the hive so that they get the smell and polish them up and get them ready to be grafted into. I'll come on the 4th day, take the cell bar frame out, take the empty frame of comb out. I'll go sit in the back of my Nissan Leaf because it's got a hatchback and I can sit on the tailgate and graft on this little shelf thing that's back there. I'll take a picture of that sometime. It's really fun. Then I'll go put it all back in the hive. Maybe rearrange if a lot of my brood has hatched out in my queen rearing area. I'll replace that with new brood. Make sure there's a fresh supply of nurse bees up in there. We want our queens to be well taken care of. Once those queens are ready to be moved to mating nukes, I will take some of my other hives. I'll take brood out of them, 2 frames of brood and 1 frame of honey. I'll stick those in my queen castles, which are single deep boxes that are divided into 3 3-frame nukes. Put 2 frames of brood, 1 frame of honey, 1 queen cell, close it up. Come back about 2 weeks later. I've smashed too many virgin queens trying to check if they've hatched, so I quit doing that. Just assume they're fine. If for some reason something didn't happen and didn't work right, you've only got 3 frames to deal with. You can just put them back in another hive. Or, you know, in the case of 1 queen castle like this, you're going to have at least one of these hives the queen has come back and mated and started laying. And so if the other 2 haven't, or one of the other 2 haven't, I just pull the divider between the 2, and now I have a 6-frame nuke. And that gives them a boost, and they're ready to become, you know, take the most empty frame out. Now I've got a 5-frame nuke, I can sell that. Somebody wants queens, I can sell the queens. And then because I'm using standard frames, when that's all said and done, it either can become a bigger hive if I've sold queens, I can combine all those little nukes back together and make bigger hives. Or if I've sold the nukes, I can just take all these frames and put them back in the original population. So I don't have these little mating nuke frames that don't fit anywhere. I don't have to have, or even the half-size frames. I don't have to worry about a special box that holds half-size frames either. I use all the same size frames. Yes?
You use masonite or plywood for your dividers?
The dividers are made of 5mm Luan plywood. It's available at any big box hardware store. It costs like $5 or $10 a sheet. And what's really convenient is because I use a 1/4-inch dado blade to cut that slot in either end. You can find the design for queen castles on my website also. If you're not good at woodworking, you can build your own. You can just buy them from Brushy Mountain, I think, has them. But they usually will sell 3x3 mediums, and they'll sell 4x2 deeps. So in the deep, they'll have 2 frames, 2 frames, 2 frames, 2 frames. And those work if you have a good enough environment. Like Arkansas, it was warm enough. But in Oregon, they really need 3 frames of brood to be able to keep everything warm enough. It depends on your area. Again, it's important to remember that all beekeeping is local. So that's all I have for now. There are many more methods you can find on Mike's website. They've got all wonderful names, all invented by very expert beekeepers. Try a bunch of different ones. There are other graftless methods using cutting comb out. You can do things like meld distal cones on the spot, queen on the spot, OTS on the spot. Yeah, that's right. So there's lots of different things. Take the opportunity to look into different methods. Pick 1 or 2 a year that you want to try for yourself. I recommend this one because for a small beekeeper with 5 hives or so, this is going to be able to be really doable, and you can still maintain your honey production out of your queen production hive. And you can find all these resources if you're like videos will be on YouTube. My podcast is there at the top. Facebook. If you don't like Facebook, you can try the forum and enjoy. Any questions? All right, well, I'll be around. I've got one more talk tonight. I'll be around for the rest of the week. Feel free to stop me and ask me questions, talk to me, whatever. That's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Thanks, Solomon.